Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein announced a series of new charges against 12 Russian intelligence agencies arising out of the special counsel's investigation of the last election. The new counts, 11 of them, include charges of conspiracy by the Russian intelligence officials against the US, money laundering, specifically with Bitcoin, reinforcing my idea that Bitcoin's inherently bad, and attempts to break into state election boards and other government agencies. So that's sort of the broad strokes, but we want to go to Rod Rosenstein from earlier today during that press conference announcing what the situation was.
The indictment charges 12 Russian military officers by name for conspiring to interfere with the 2016 presidential election. 11 of the defendants are charged with conspiring to hack into computers, steal documents, and release those documents with the intent to interfere in the election. One of those defendants and a 12th Russian military officer are charged with conspiring to infiltrate computers of organizations involved in administering elections, including state boards of election, secretaries of state, and companies that supply software used to administer elections.
So already in there, there's quite a bit to unpack. One part that we should mention is when they talk about the state boards of elections, we had previously known that voter data had been stolen. I believe at the time we thought it was 200,000 voters' data had been stolen. It turns out it's actually 500,000 voters' data had been stolen during that part of the operation. And Rod Rosenstein mentioned that they have the particular names of the Russian intelligence officers. Those include both lieutenants, but also majors as well, showing that this went up to higher levels of the GRU.
Looked like they had one of them there behind Rod Rosenstein.
Yeah, I thought that was the most interesting man alive.
Yeah, totally,
young
that's
person.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so look guys, there's a lot of talk about Trump and we're gonna do that too, and it's very, very relevant. But I want you to focus on the most important thing here. They got into the state boards of elections and they were trying to hack into the software that administers our elections. So that is super serious. If they were successful in that effort last time, or if they are successful in that effort next time, that means they flat out just steal our democracy. That is not a hyperbole. If they are successful, that is hijacking the actual vote, not a tweet, not some fake news on social media. That's going straight into our votes. So whether you're on the right or the left, the time to talk about how this is hysteria and that there's actually no evidence has passed. If you made that argument before, I love you brothers and sisters, but you were wrong. So whether it's connected to Trump or not connected to Trump, that's an interesting discussion and we'll have it. But the Russians definitely interfered in the election, and it wasn't just on social media, it was actually trying to get to the vote, and that is incredibly serious and a threat to our democracy. And whether it's the Russians or anyone else, we must safeguard those votes under any and all circumstances. And what I'm really afraid of is that all the different states are needlessly territorial and parochial. They don't know how to safeguard themselves against Russian or Chinese or Indian or any other hacker, right? And we have to get serious on a national level here to make sure that those votes are real and protected. That to me is by far the biggest news here and is really being overlooked by a lot of the other media.
So I totally agree on the stakes. We do have to be clear, and I'm sure you would have if you'd continued, that there are no allegations in these new indictments that the outcome of the election was affected by the particular things that they're talking about here. Also, there's no allegations that any of the people who communicated with those intelligence officials, which we'll get into how they were attempting to spread information and all of that, knew that they were interacting with Russian intelligence officials. Now, some Republicans have gone a step beyond and said this proves it didn't happen, which is not what Rod Rosenstein is saying, but they did make clear that they are not alleging those things at this point. But again, to the whole evidence argument, again, this 29, I think page it was, indictment does not include the raw intelligence gathered or anything like that. But it says that these particular Russian officials, not some building, these particular people, they have the information on exactly what they did, but also that they were watching them in real time while they were planning it. We don't know for sure that it was US intelligence that was gathering it as the planning was happening, or if we are collaborating with some other foreign intelligence agency. But this is based on information both when the acts were actually done and during the planning and communication phases earlier with particular Russian intelligence officials.
That really suggests that the deep state dropped the ball.
Yeah.
Like they really knew and then didn't do anything to avoid the outcome they were seeking to avoid.
Yeah, if the deep state wanted Trump to lose, well, they got a curious way of showing it.
Yeah.
Okay, but look, one last thing before we get to Trump, which is, like, if you're at this point still saying, no, not enough evidence, I think maybe that the entirety of the FBI and the Justice Department might have made this up, and you think you're on the left, I mean, I don't know where you think you are on the political spectrum, but that's a lunatic conspiracy theory at this point. So I'm sure Alex Jones is saying similar things, and so it's up to you. You do whatever you want with your life, okay? But if you think that the Russians did not try to do this, man, okay, then you don't believe anything. Then you're in the camp of the Trump-like people who say everything is fake news, everything's contrived, and everything's a conspiracy. And that's loony.
I've always been a follow the evidence kind of guy. And very early on in this conversation, people would say to me, you're a Russia skeptic. And I would always say, I'm an everything skeptic. That's my job, right? But so early on, I would say, let's see where the evidence takes us. That's what I've said all along. And I have to say, at this point, man, this would have to be a very elaborate conspiracy to deceive the American people into thinking the Russians were trying to interfere, because otherwise, as you said, you've got so many people about Rod Rosenstein and Mueller and all these things. It would take a lot to convince me that this isn't real at this point. Put it that way.
And yeah, well, good. I'm glad to hear that. And I'm again, there were not meaningful dissents from the beginning. There would have, if these guys were making it up, if this was an orchestrated effort to make it seem like the Russians had engaged in behavior they didn't. I imagine, like if you go see Shock and Awe, the number of intelligence officials who went to those Night Ritter journalists, or when they called them, were like, this is not how we do things. They're making this up. This evidence does not exist. That didn't happen.
Right.
That simply didn't happen.
Really fast, just for context, because we have new numbers here, just to add to the total, because interestingly, this information which we just got today, Donald Trump actually got earlier this week. Rod Rosenstein briefed the president on these new charges and the intelligence that was used to generate them. But apparently it either didn't stick or he forgot, because Donald Trump, as of this morning, said, I think that we're being very hurt very badly by I would call it the witch hunt. I would call it the rigged witch hunt. I think that really hurts our country and it really hurts our relationship with Russia. So just several days after being told extremely specific information about how this was actually done, he still calls it a witch hunt. It's actually one of my favorite witch hunts. It's an exciting, dynamic one, because we're now up to 100 criminal counts against 32 people and 3 companies. Among the people previously charged are 14 Russians, 3 Trump associates who have already pleaded guilty. There are 5 guilty pleas. 1 sentencing is already done. And if you look out there, there's also an awesome photo from inside prison of Paul Manafort. So exciting times in the witch hunt.
I think Paul Manafort, actually, because there was a Ben Nelson quality to Paul Manafort before, where he just looked like that guy is fake and lying and I think he looks better. Like his hair's, in prison, his hair's gone gray, it's growing out. He looks like more of a regular guy, like you'd meet on a weekend and have a barbecue.
2 easy ways to follow the Young Turks. One is hit the subscribe button down below. Then you're a TYT subscriber. And second is ring the bell. And when you do that on YouTube, you're notified of our videos.